Welcome, everyone, to VPOD.ai. If you're looking for a professional book review podcast like this, visit VPOD.ai. Today, we are cracking open what I can only describe as a purple and gold phenomenon. We are looking at a book that has probably started more arguments at dinner tables than politics over the last, 3 decades? We're talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert T. Kiyosaki.
Oh, it really is a juggernaut.
Yeah.
I mean, it was first published back in 1997, and here we are in 2026, and the sales are they're still massive. Tens of millions of copies sold. But to your point, it's not just a finance book. It's a cultural touchstone. It's one of those books people either treat like a gospel of personal freedom or they absolutely loathe it.
They throw it across the room.
Exactly.
It is incredibly polarizing. It seems to challenge the absolute bedrock of how most of us were raised to think about work, about school, and definitely about money. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We need to figure out, is this book a timeless masterpiece of financial literacy? Is it the wake-up call we all need? Or is it just a collection of, oversimplified generalizations?
A glorified get-rich-quick scheme.
Yeah.
It's a valid question because when you strip away the marketing hype, and there is a lot of hype, the core message is actually quite radical. And to understand why it triggers people so much, we have to start with the narrative hook. The whole thing is built around this allegory of two fathers.
Right, the tale of two dads.
Yeah.
And it's such a clever literary device, even if, and I know we'll get to this, it's a bit controversial. So Kiyosaki describes his upbringing as being shaped by two very different father figures. First, you have Poor Dad.
That was his biological father. And the label Poor Dad is interesting because this man wasn't poor in the sense of being destitute. He was highly educated, had a PhD, worked as a high-ranking government employee. He had the steady paycheck, good benefits, the whole package.
That sounds like the American dream, honestly. Stable, educated, respectable. It's exactly what most parents want for their kids.
On paper, yes. But his mantra was very traditional: study hard, get good grades, find a secure job. The problem was, despite the good salary, he's struggled financially his whole life. He represents that quintessential employee mindset. He was playing by the rules, but the rules were kind of rigged against him.
And then in the other corner, we have Rich Dad.
Right. This was his best friend's father. And this man, he never even finished the 8th grade, a dropout. But he went on to become, a very wealthy capitalist, an investor. His mantra was completely different. Learn how money works so it works for you.
I love the specific examples he gives of how they spoke. It's subtle, but it makes such a difference. Poor Dad would look at something expensive and just say, I can't afford it.
Yeah.
Statement closed. End of discussion.
See, that's the key. I can't afford it shuts down the brain. It's a declaration of defeat. Rich Dad, however, he forbade that phrase. He insisted on asking, how can I afford it?
Which forces your brain to work. It turns a barrier into a problem to be solved.
It triggers creativity. And I think, whether Rich Dad was a real person or just a composite character, which is a huge point of contention, the device works. It just perfectly illustrates the divide between employee thinking and investor thinking.
Okay, let's unpack the biggest bomb this book drops. And I remember the first time I heard this, I actually argued with the text.
Oh, most people do. This is the aha moment for millions and simultaneously the source of rage for millions of accountants.
Well, sure. Because traditional accounting tells us that if you own a house, that's an asset. It's on your balance sheet. Kiyosaki comes along and says, nope, your house is not an asset. It is a liability.
And he defines it so simply, based on cash flow, not value. That is the critical distinction. He says an asset is only something that puts money into your pocket. A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. Simple as that.
So, okay, let's look at the house through that lens. You got the mortgage, property taxes, insurance repairs.
Exactly. Every single month, that house is taking money out of your pocket. So in Kiyosaki's world, it's a liability. He argues that banking on appreciation, just hoping the price goes up, that's speculation, not investing.
That is a hard pill to swallow for so many people. I mean, for generations, buy a house was the way to build wealth. So if a house is a liability, what actually counts as an asset?
Well, things like rental properties, where the rent covers all the expenses and leaves you with profit, dividend-paying stocks, royalties from a book or a patent, businesses that can run without you physically being there, things that, if you stopped working today, would keep feeding you.
And liabilities are everything else.
Pretty much. Personal cars, credit card debt, that boat you use 3 times a year, and yes, your primary residence.
This leads to what he calls the trap. And this is really relatable. He talks about how the middle class gets stuck. You get a raise at work, and what do?
Buy a bigger house or a nicer car.
Right. You think you're acquiring assets, but you're actually just buying bigger liabilities.
He calls it lifestyle inflation. You're just increasing your expenses to match your income, so you never actually get ahead. You just have a nicer cage in the rat race.
The rat race. That's another huge concept here. But isn't that just life? I mean, most people have to work.
Ideally, no.
Yeah.
But the system is designed that way. And this connects to his critique of the education system. Kiyosaki is very, very harsh on schools. He argues they're designed to manufacture good employees, not employers. They teach professional skills, which are important, but they completely fail to teach financial literacy.
It's so true. I learned the Pythagorean theorem, but I didn't learn how to read a balance sheet until way later in life,
Right.
or even how taxes actually work.
And that's his point. We are trained to work for money. We trade our time for a paycheck. That's earned income. But the problem with earned income is it's the highest taxed and you have no leverage. If you stop working, the money stops.
So the goal is to shift from earned income to passive income.
Correct. Financial independence in this philosophy isn't a number, it's a state of being. You are free when your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses.
So if my expenses are $5,000 a month and my assets pay me $5,001, I'm retired.
Technically, yes, you are out of the rat race. You might choose to work, but you don't have to. And this leads to his principle of mind your own business.
I love this one because it sounds rude, but it's actually strategic.
It's profound, really. He says most people spend their lives minding everyone else's business. Their boss's business, the government's business by paying taxes, the bank's business, but they never mind their own business, which is their asset column.
There's that famous story in the book about Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. He was speaking to some MBA students, and he asked them, what business am I in?
And everyone laughs, of course. Someone finally says, Ray, you're in the hamburger business.
And Ray Kroc says, no, I'm not in the hamburger business. My business is real estate.
That is such a key distinction. The hamburger was the product. The business was owning the franchise locations. The real estate was the true asset.
It changes how you look at your own career, doesn't it? You might be a doctor by profession, but your business should be acquiring assets.
Precisely. You keep your day job to fund your business. You use your paycheck to buy things that will eventually replace that paycheck.
Okay, so speaking of jobs, there's another controversial piece of advice. Work to learn, don't work to earn.
This is aimed right at young people. He says don't pick a job based on salary, pick it based on the skills you'll acquire. He lists sales, marketing, communication. Those are the essential skills.
There's that anecdote about the young writer. She interviews him and says she wants to be a best-selling author. She's talented, but her books aren't selling.
And Kiyosaki just tells her, you need to take a sales training course.
And she gets offended. I'm a writer, not a salesperson.
Her identity was tied to the craft, not the business of it. And Kiyosaki points to his own book and says, look at the cover. It says best-selling author. It doesn't say best writing author.
Ouch. That's gotta hurt.
But it's a valid point.
It's harsh, but it highlights a reality. Technical skill is rarely enough. You have to know how to sell that skill. The world is full of talented poor people because they focus on the product and ignore the business.
So we've covered the philosophy, the assets, the mindset. It all sounds great. But we have to look at the other side because for all the millions of fans, there are plenty of people who think this book is dangerous. Let's get into the critique.
We have to be honest here. The biggest flaw, and you see this everywhere, is what I call the how-to gap.
Yeah, I felt that too. The book gets you all fired up and then you close it and go, okay, but how do I actually do any of this?
It's very light on specifics.
Yeah.
It's a motivational book, not an instruction manual. It tells you to invest in real estate, but not how to analyze a market or screen tenants. It just glazes over the hard work. And that leads to the risk factor. The strategies he suggests, using debt to buy assets, that's really high risk, right?
Extremely. He's a big proponent of OPM, other people's money. He talks about good debt versus bad debt. But if your tenant moves out or the economy tanks, that good debt turns into bad debt overnight.
And the bank still wants its money.
Exactly. If you don't have the cash reserves to weather a storm, you can go bankrupt very, very quickly.
That's a common criticism. It has a bit of that get-rich-quick or Amway-style vibe.
It does. It creates this sense of insider secrets that's very appealing.
And then there's the tone. We have to talk about the tone.
Yeah. Pompous is a word that comes up a lot.
He really bashes the poor dad.
Yeah.
He portrays this educated, hardworking man, his own father, as like a fool for playing by the rules.
There's a deep irony there, isn't there? He bashes education, but he got rich selling millions of educational books. And his rich dad empire needs lawyers, accountants, editors. All those educated employees he critiques.
There's also the bit about Rich Dad himself.
Right. Researchers have tried to find this guy. There's no record of him existing. Kiyosaki has sort of admitted he's a composite character.
Which, as a literary device, is fine. But when you sell it as a true story, it feels a little dishonest.
It impacts the credibility, for sure, but does it make the advice about assets and liabilities wrong? Not necessarily. The math of cash flow still works.
So we've got a polarizing book. On one hand, it's a mindset shifter. On the other, it's vague, risky, and a bit arrogant. Who is this book actually for?
If we're looking at the consensus, this book is essential reading for the philosophy of money. I'd give it a solid 4 out of 5 stars for its ability to deprogram that employee mindset.
It's a primer, essentially.
Exactly. It's for the young adult just starting out or the person who feels stuck. It's fantastic for forcing you to look at your spending habits. It breaks that psychological link between just working hard and getting rich.
So it's the spark, not the whole fire.
Perfect analogy. But, and this is a big but, it should not be your only financial book. You need to follow it up with technical books on investing, accounting, and law. You need the how to go with the why.
So treat it as a mindset shift, not an investment manual.
Precisely. Take the core ideas, asset versus liability, pay yourself first, and apply them. But maybe ignore the disdain for education, and definitely ignore any get-rich-quick undertones. Real wealth building is usually slow and kind of boring.
And even the critics admit the core concept, make your money work for you, is sound.
It's the simplified delivery that makes it so accessible, though. He packaged complex ideas into a fable. And stories stick.
That's very true. I'll never forget the best-selling author line.
Or the I can't afford it trap. Once you hear that, you catch yourself saying it. And that alone is worth the price of the book.
So let's wrap this up with a final thought. We're in a very different world than 1997. We have AI, the gig economy. Does this book still hold up?
I think the gap he talks about is actually widening. He suggests the poor work for money, while the rich invent money. In an age where traditional safe jobs are being automated, that advice is more relevant than ever.
That is a provocative thought. The definition of safe has totally changed. The poor dad path might actually be the riskier one now because the stability is an illusion.
That's the chilling realization. If you aren't building an asset column, you are vulnerable.
So I'll leave you with this question to mull over. Look at your bank statement from last month. Really look at it. Are you buying assets that feed you, or are you just buying liabilities that eat you?
And are you minding your own business?
Exactly. Thanks for diving in with us today. It's been a fascinating look at a classic.
Always a pleasure. Keep learning.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.